Remember the last words of Jesus on the cross? Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. What's this got to do with Jesus driving out a demon in Mark 1:26? This is exactly what we're going to discover today. Mark 1:26 is a very simple verse from a grammatical point of view. Let's read it. Kai sparaxan auton to pneuma to akatarthon, kai phonesan phonemegale, exelsen exautu. Let's try to focus on the high level grammatical structure. Very simple. So, what is the subject of the sentence? Here we have it to pneuma to akatharton. Okay, so this is the subject, and then to akatharton is the adjective connected with the subject. Now, what is the verb? The principal verb of the sentence is here exelsen, and this ex autu, we know the preposition ex means out of, so it's the place out of where the subject goes. And then what is the rest? Well, you have this connection between sparaxan and phonesan. These are other two verbs, but these are participles. All right, so they are connected with the subject, and they give some more information about what the subject did in the sentence. So the simple structure of the sentence is subject, verb, and place out of which the subject goes. And then you have these two participle, sparaxen and phonesan, that gives more information. The first participle, sparaxen, has this auton as the direct object. And then you have phonesan, they have phonemegalen as another indirect object. And as we know, these kai are just conjunction. Okay, so now let's go word by word and let's try to figure out the meaning of this sentence. All right, so the subject first. To pneuma. We've seen this many times already by now. This is the spirit. It's neuter. You see this to, which is definite article in the neuter gender, and pneuma is the spirit. Okay, in this case is the evil spirit, and in fact Mark specified that this type of spirit is a catharton. There's a repetition of the article between the subject and the adjective, descriptive adjective. So it's the spirit impure. Again, all these terms we've seen them in the past. A catharton, okay, not pure, impure, unclean. So the subject is the spirit unclean, the unclean spirit, the evil spirit. Now, let's move to the participle because those give some information about the actions that this subject, which is the evil spirit, did before finally exelsen exautu. Okay, so the first is this one, sparaxan, and the next one is phonesan. You see this ending, xan and san. Now, these endings tell us that these participle are conjugated in the aorist tense. All right, this is the aorist tense, and they are in the nominative case, masculine singular. All right. Well, actually, it's neuter singular because they agree with the subject, which is neuter. So the first participle, sparaxan, comes from the verb sparasso. Okay, sparasso. So now sparasso means to tear or to rend. Okay, indicates the idea of breaking apart. Okay, but it's a very strong verb. It indicates the idea of breaking or tearing, but with a lot of strength, a lot of effort, a lot of force in a convulsion type of movement. Okay, so indicates the action of the evil spirit that is throwing the poor man into convulsions, like sort of epileptic type of reaction. Okay, so Sparaxan auton, and this auton is the object, we've seen it, is the personal pronoun. We've seen it many times in the third person singular. In the object, you see this on, which is the accusative case. So throwing him into convulsions, we could translate. So the spirit, the unclean spirit, throwing him into convulsions, and phonesan, phonemegalen. Phonesan is the other um, participle and comes from the verb phoneo. Okay, phoneo. You probably realize the Greek root phone, which goes with the voice, with the sound, right? In English, the term phone comes from the Greek verb phoneo, which means to sound, okay, or to speak, to make a sound, right? So the spirit did two things. He threw the poor guy into convulsions, and at the same time, he spoke or cry out loud, okay, to cry out. And there is this repetition, phonesan phone, okay, he cried out, and you see this ending, phone megale, this eta with iota subscript. This is the dative case, okay, and indicates the way in which the evil spirit cried out. He cried out with phone, which is the noun coming from the same root, with a voice. Okay, so he cried out with a voice, megale. Well, megale, it's an adjective, okay, and means great, big. Okay, so he cried out in a big voice, literally. So he cried out in a loud voice. All right. So here we have it. The unclean spirit throwing him into convulsions and crying out with a loud voice did something. And what did he do? Well, excelsen. We've seen this verb a lot of time. This is an aorist tense of an irregular verb. The verb is exerchomai. Okay, exerchomai. All right, so you have this preposition ek or ex, which we know means out of, and then the verb erchomai, which means to go. Okay, so the verb means to go out or to exit. Okay, to go out. So what did the unclean spirit do? He went out. Okay, he went out. Finally, he got out of the body of that poor man. So he got out, ex autu, repetition, exelsen ex. He got out of, and ex or ek, the preposition ek wants the genitive. You see here, omicron upsilon, and out. So it's in the genitive case, but just because it's needed by the preposition ex. And autu, as this auton, we've seen it is the personal pronoun, third person singular, meaning out of him. So he came out of him. So putting all together, we can translate this verse as, and the unclean spirit, throwing him into convulsions and crying out in a loud voice, came out of him. This same account is narrated by Luke. So it's very interesting to see how Luke describes the same scene. All right. We have it here in Luke 4:35. Luke described it very similarly by using slightly different words. So it can give us a little different perspective on what really happened in that moment. So Luke says that to daimonion, so he calls it the demon. All right, this is what Mark calls the unclean spirit. Okay, so the demon ripsan auton. You see, Mark used sparaxen auton. Luke says ripsan auton. It's the same structure, participle, aorist, but Luke used the word ripto. Rito means to throw, to cast. Okay, so Mark describes the way that the guy looked, right? Probably the people present there, they saw this guy on the floor shaking in convulsions, all right? And Luke says that the demon cast him down, threw him down, astonished, in the middle. All right. So you have to imagine, right? You're in the synagogue, and all the present people completely astonished of what they were experiencing, and in the middle, this poor man and Jesus driving demon out of him, and the demon coming out of this person. But before coming out, the demon throws this guy on the floor in the middle, okay, in the middle of the synagogue. So everybody's looking at this scene, and throwing him into convulsions on the floor. Exelsen epautu. This is more or less the same expression that Mark uses. He came out of him. Instead of using ex, he uses apo. It's pretty much the same meaning. But then look at something more. He says, blapsan auton meden. Blapsan, again, is another participle, similar to ripsan, similar to sparaxan, which means hurting. Okay. Meden means nothing or in no way. Okay. It's a negative particle. So without, we could translate, without hurting him. So Luke is giving us a little bit more of information. So the demon, yes, can throw the guy on the floor in the middle, can throw him into convulsions, but he doesn't have the power anymore to hurt him. All right, that's the last thing he can do. Okay, and that's because Jesus is there. Right now he needs to leave, and Jesus is protecting the guy. Very interesting, this other point of view given us by Luke. But what's this got to do with the last words of Jesus on the cross? Well, if we read Luke 23:46, where we find these words, we're going to see something very similar. Let's read. Kai phonesas phone megale. This is exactly the same expression used by Mark. Look at that. Kai phonesam phone megale. Okay. And crying out in a loud voice is exactly the same expression that Mark uses for the unclean spirit. Jesus from the cross is crying out with a loud voice. Okay. O Jesus ape, Jesus said, Pater, Father, eis hierasu into your hand, parathizemai, I command to pneumam, my spirit. You see the duality here? So you have the pneuma, which is of course a pneuma akatharton, unclean for the spirit, for the demonic spirit that cries out in a loud voice. And on the cross, there's absolutely the reversal, right? Jesus is on the cross destroying that, is destroying Satan, right? And is destroying all the evil spirits on the cross. And something very similar happens. He cries out in a loud voice, and from his body, his Holy Spirit, not his unclean spirit, comes out. And you see, tuto de eipon, and after saying that, ex epneusen. You see, this X is the same X here, is the same X here. So the unclean spirit came out of the poor guy, and here the Holy Spirit came out of Jesus. He breathed his lust, right? And the spirit came out of his body. So you have this incredible analogy, which is the total antithesis, right, of what happens in Mark. In Mark, you have this unclean spirit that crying out in a loud voice comes out of the body of that poor man. And this image gets completely turned around on the cross Whereas Jesus is crying out in a loud voice, Father, into your hand I commit my spirit, and his Holy Spirit comes out from his body.